Hi there. Today I want to respond to comments that I received on one of my previous videos about the mere means principle. So the mere means principle, it's a video in the series about irrational ethics, and it is related to the basic right to bodily autonomy. So the mere means principle says that we are not allowed to use someone else as a means against that person's will. Yeah? If that person does not want to be used in that way, we are not allowed to use that person as a means for our own ends. And that relates to the right to bodily autonomy because you can say the body of that individual belongs to that person and not to us. Yeah? So we are not allowed to use the body of that person. Now, there was a question, a response that I received. What about, in a video I referred, for example, to a vegan diet. And there's often in animal rights discussions with meat eaters, the topic about killing insects by using, for example, insecticides for crop protection. Is this not a violation of the mere means principle if we would kill insects? Now, let's first of all suppose, of course, that insects are sentient beings, that they have a will, that they have a perception of their own body, things like that. So, if that is the case, the question goes, does this mere means principle, could it explain why the cases are different? That the case of eating meat, killing an animal for food in a factory farm, for example, and killing an insect to protect our crops. And you can say that vegans are killing animals, insects, against their will. That's true, if insects have a will and they do not want to be killed, in order to achieve their ends. So their ends is to have something to eat. Yeah. So it seems that also vegans violate this mere means principle. But I want to explain here now that killing insects to protect crops is not a violation of this mere means principle. It's not a violation of the right to bodily autonomy. So this question that I received is a good question to explain a bit more detail what this mere means principle is. So the mere means principle, it refers to it has two words, so it refers to two conditions. First, the mere part, you use someone merely as a means if it's against that person's will. Yeah. So again, let's suppose that an insect is a person, is a sentient being. Suppose that insect has a will. If you do something against that will, that refers to the mere part of the mere means principle. Now, then there is the second word, the word means. Use someone as a means. And that basically means that the body of that person has to be present in order to reach your end. And here is the important difference between killing insects and killing pigs in a farm, for example. So if you want to eat meat, the body of the pig has to be present. Without the body, you cannot use the body as a means for food. Yeah? So the body needs to be present, and that relates to this right to bodily autonomy. With killing insects, it's not true. In order to have food, to have the crops, the grains, we do not need the bodies of the insects. On the contrary, we do not want the bodies of the insects. If the bodies of the insects were not on the field, so if the insects were not on the crop field, we would not have to use them, to kill them. So that's the basic difference. that means that if we kill an insect, we are not using this insect as merely a means. We are not violating this right to bodily autonomy of the insect, because the presence of the body is not required to reach our ends. We can still eat the crops if the insects were not present. So that's basically the biggest difference. And in the video I also explained why this is the case about, it relates to this negative externalities idea. So, for example, if the insects have a right to life, the right not to be killed, and the insects move to our crop fields and we cannot kill them because they have right not to be killed, that harms us. Yeah? So the presence of the insects on our crop fields is harmful to us. So their presence causes a negative externality, a cost to us, because we have less food. Yeah? So on the other hand, with the pig in a factory farm, if an factory farm has the right to bodily autonomy, the presence of this pig does not harm us, because if the pig was not present, we would be the same off. Yeah? We could not eat the pig either. Yeah? So that's why the presence of a pig with this right to bodily autonomy does not cause negative externality. So that's the basic difference between this right not to be killed and the right not to be used as merely a means against one's will. So this second right does not have negative externalities, and therefore we can argue that it is a better right, yeah? That we can grant everyone, even including insects, this right. Okay, and then that relates to this idea of self-defense. That's also mentioned in this comment that I received. So if we kill the insects, you can consider it as a kind of self-defense. We protect our property, or the things that we work for, the crop field. We protect our food. On the other hand, if we kill a pig to eat that pig, that's not a kind of self-defense, because the pig, when the pig is present and this pig has this right to bodily autonomy, the pig did not cause any harm to us, did not cause any negative externalities. So killing and eating this pig is not a kind of self-defense. And then finally, the question is, okay, this right not to be killed can be trumped by a right to self-defense. Yeah. So, okay, the insects have the right not to be killed, but I have a right to self-defense, and then we have to weigh those two rights. And here we arrive again at a kind of utilitarian principle. We have to see if the self-defense is that the proportionality principle is valid, and so that's the self-defense, the level of harm we cause by self-defense is not out of proportion. And to see that, we need another principle that I spoke about, that is the maximum relative preferences principle, and that's a utilitarian principle. So it looks at preferences that we have, that the insects have, looks at well-being, for example. And so now the question is, what are the levels of well-being that an insect can have, and how strong can they have preferences compared to our preferences for food? And then, of course, it's very difficult to say, because we do not even know if insects have a consciousness, have subjective preferences. And even if they have preferences, we do not know how strong their preferences are, if they are as strong as we perceive our own preferences. So when I have a preference for food, when I'm very hungry, I have a very strong feeling, a very strong preference for food. When an insect has a preference for food, it's not clear if that feeling is equally strong, that his preference is equally strong. And so it is possible that insects have a small preference and that for food, and we have a strong preference for food, and that if insects take away our food, then the question is, are we allowed to use lethal methods in the self-defense? Are we allowed to kill the insects? It is possible that we are allowed to use lethal methods. If the insects, let's say the insects are not sentient and do not have any subjective preferences, then it's clear that we are allowed to use lethal methods. If they only have very small or weak preferences, even then you can easily see that our preferences for food trump their preferences for food, and that means we are allowed to use lethal methods as self-defense. Now, of course, we are not very sure about this. So what is the pragmatic solution in this case? There's a real possibility that we are allowed to use lethal methods, but as long as there is still a probability that insects can have high levels of preference for food, that there is a probability that lethal methods are out of proportion. That's not a kind of proportional self-defense. That means that we have to, if possible, look for non-lethal ways to scare away the insects. And that's something for scientific research. So what we can do is develop insecticides that are less harmful for insects. For example, in insecticides or using genetically modified crops that produce a chemical substance that smells bad for the animals, and that for the insects, for us it's harmless, but for the insects, it basically kind of scares away those insects, scare them away from the crop fields. For the insects, the crop fields start to smell bad. Suppose if you can find something like that, in a way that you can scare away the insects, like a scarecrow scares away birds, using non-lethal methods, that would be a good improvement. And that's why it's worthwhile to invest in this kind of research. First of all, invest in research to discover whether or not insects can have preferences, have a consciousness or not. And secondly, if they have a consciousness, develop methods that are not so lethal to the insects. So this idea, this case study of the insects destroying our crops, it's a very good example to explain those two principles: the utilitarian principle to maximize relative preferences, and the mere means principle to respect bodily autonomy. Okay, see you next time.